Hello YouTube, Goddard Radio Moscow here again with another beer review for you, as is usual. So for this one we're going to head back to Estonia, and it's been a little while since I've done an Estonian beer review for you. But tonight we're actually going to try some Estonian mead, so this should be quite an interesting beer review for us to do. So we're going to return to the Saku Õlletehas from near Tallinn in the northwest of the country, and we're going to try their Mõdu beer, which, as I mentioned to you, is an Estonian mead beer. It's apparently quite common for Estonians to drink mead beer around the holiday time, which I didn't know about that. I thought they were all into their Baltic porters and things like that, but mead is a very common sort of holiday drink. And I also want to give a good shout out to one of my best friends, Einar Karu in Tallinn. He sent me these beers over from Estonia, and I went there to visit him in March 2013, and it was really good. I highly recommend that you go and have a little look at Estonia if you ever get the chance. A really interesting country and very, very beautiful as well. So as is usual then with my beer reviews, I'll take you through a brief history of the brewery and just tell you a little bit about where the beer comes from, all of that sort of thing. But as I always say, if you are simply just interested in the tasting of this beer, then feel free to go on towards the latter part of the video and you will catch that particular segment. And as always, the brewery website's in the video description for you below, along with the link to my other Estonian beer reviews. But anyway, the history of the Saku Õlletehas goes back to the abolition of serfdom in Estonia in the year 1816, and at this point many landlords began to form industrial companies at their manors, and this included breweries and distilleries and a whole host of other operations. But in 1820, German Earl Karl Friedrich Rebender, he actually decided to establish a brewery at his manor, and the first beer brew at this manor is actually documented as having taken place in October of 1820. But he had been born in 1764 as the son of Otto Magnus von Rebender and also Sophie Katharina Dorothea von der Paleni. But Karl Friedrich's father actually owned several other manors throughout Estonia, the Baltic states, and over into Germany as well. And you will notice this in Estonia, there's a lot of people do have German names, and there's quite a sort of German and Swedish influence on the culture there, although their language is actually closer to Finnish. Although Finnish and Estonian people will only understand maybe 30% of each other's language, even though to the untrained ear they do actually sound very, very similar. But under the Rebenders, in fact, the brewery didn't gain much prominence, and the ownership actually was transferred to the Bago family in 1846, and it was under them that the brewery production intensified. And as a tribute to the work of Valerian Bago in the brewery, the Saku Hele was produced, and this beer follows Saku's oldest recipe. And the bottle, if you actually go and look at it on the website, you will see the Bago family coat of arms as a tribute to the work that this family did with the brewery. But at the end of the 19th century, competition between the breweries intensified, and in order to ensure the ability of the brewery to compete, the quality of the brewing and the capacity of the brewery had to increase. By 1871, this had resulted in Saku being the dominating beer in the Tallinn market, which proved that the brewery was no longer producing poor quality tavern beer and that it was ready to compete in the international markets. At this early stage, the beer was in fact of such good quality that it actually won a bronze medal at the 1875 Kadriorg Agricultural Festival. Now in 1876 a new steam-powered brewery was constructed at the Rebender Manor, and in 1877 the brewery sent their beer to an exhibition in Riga in Latvia, where it actually picked up a silver medal. But just before the turn of the 20th century, in 1899, a narrow gauge railway from the manor to Tallinn was completed, and the first transport of the beer actually took place on September 28th of that year. Now the company also became a public limited company to increase their circle of owners, and the aim here was to conquer the Tallinn beer market, and they actually required significant investment for this. And the new owners that were included in this sort of investment period for the brewery, if you like, included G. Shiel and also the distillers Rosen, two big Estonian capitalists, if you like. But the venture was so successful that Saku produced 203,800 barrels of beer, and it also resulted in the closure of the last brewery in Tallinn, which was the Revelia Brewery. They closed their doors in 1911, and thus Saku gained the monopoly of the Tallinn and Harjumaa beer markets. But with the onset of World War I in 1914, all brewing in Estonia stopped until 1921. And despite there being 9 breweries in Estonia at this time, Saku would soon become the monopoly brewery in the northern part of Estonia. And the brewery actually stood out due to the innovations they made during this period. In 1928, they first began to use the half-litre bottles, which replaced the half-toop bottles. And this is an old Estonian measurement. Apparently, 1 toop is 1.23 litres. So these beers that you were getting from this brewery brewery before were about 600 or so millilitres at the time. But with the onset of the Second World War and the Soviet occupation of Estonia, Saku Brewery was nationalised along with all other companies in Estonia. But during the Soviet occupation of Estonia, the brewery was producing the Ziegler and Kuldeni Uder beers, which were sold in brown and green bottles. And in 1976, the Saku Brewery became an experimental brewery, which meant that there was actually heavy investment in the infrastructure of the brewery. And they also survived the prohibition period put in place by Gorbachev in 1985. But the post-Soviet era began for Saku with the establishment of the Baltic Beverages Holding Company, and the Pripps Brewery from Sweden and the Hartwall Brewery in Finland actually acquired a 75% holding in the Saku Brewery, and the brewery was then reconstructed and received new equipment after when the Baltic Beverages Holding actually took control of the brewery. But the Saku Original was introduced in 1993, and this was followed by the Rock Beer in 1994, which was introduced as a special edition for the Rock Festival and later became a regular beer. But the company once again became a public limited company in 1995, and the first shares were traded on the Tallinn Stock Exchange in 1996, and this also saw the introduction of the first alcohol-free beers this year as well. But in 1997, the brewery redesigned their label art for all beers except the relatively young Rock Beer, and the shares of the company were then moved from the free market and relisted on the secondary exchange of the Tallinn Stock Exchange in 1998, and in 1999 the brewery introduced their ice beer, which gained popularity very quickly in Estonia and indeed the other Baltic states. In the year 2000, the brewery celebrated their 180th anniversary with the introduction of the Saku Bay Rival beer, and this was followed by the introduction of the Kiss ciders in 2001. These are very nice ciders, by the way, so you should go and check them out when you are in Estonia, of course. Very tasty, almost actually like the Rekorderligs or Kopparbergs that you get from Sweden. But in 2004, the brewery broke into the Finnish market after an agreement with the Seinäjoki Brewery, and the following year they introduced the Saku Cold beer as their premium series, as well as introducing a scheme that promoted the election of the best Estonian pub. Now 2007 saw the company rebrand itself as a beverage company rather than simply a brewery, and in 2008 the brewery was actually bought over by the Carlsberg Group, and following this they introduced a new crystal filtration system to replace the pasteurization as their preservation method in their beer, and they also really introduced a limited edition gourmet range of beers in August 2010, and apparently there's talk of these being reintroduced soon. So that's quite a brief history, or maybe a bit of a longer history, of the Saku Brewery. I think for my next video I will cut it down just a little bit and take out certain things so it's a little bit shorter for you. But just to list the other beers that you can get from the Saku Õlletehas, as I mentioned to you, you can get the Saku Cold, the premium range of beers. You get the Original, the Helle, which is the Czech master brewers, and it's obviously named after the Valerin Bago as well. You can see his family coat of arms on the bottle there. There's the Tume, which is a strong dark beer. They've got the Pilsner Porter Special Brew, which is aged for 12 months. The Karl Friedrich beer, which is obviously named after the original founder of the brewery. The Rock beer, which was introduced for the Rock Festival, of course. Homebrew, which is called the Kudu Ulu, and that's a very nice beer actually. Hopefully I can pick up one of those to review for you at some point too. You can get the Saku on Ice, the D-Light, which is a series of flavoured beers. There's a Radler, and they also have a series of 3 world beers as well, and at the moment it includes Manchester, Dublin and Tokyo, and each year they will actually bring in a new beer and remove the least popular one from their sales. You can also get the Taurus beer, which is a Bock beer, and Presidente 8, which is another Pilsner beer. And they also produce this guy, the Mõdu, which, as I mentioned to you, is a mead beer, and it's traditional to drink these around the holidays. So let's get this guy out and get on with the tasting. I'll just bring up the camera again and let you have a little look at the bottle art on this one. So as you can see, there's on the top label here, there's an older, I think it's an old woman, or an old guy actually, sorry, he's got a beard. You can see him just sort of stirring his pot there, and you can see the sort of S for Saku there. And if you look at the other label here, you can see some of the crests of Estonia on the bottom of the beer here, and you can see this is Karl Friedrich Rabender's signature just under the Saku brand there. Obviously a tribute to the original starter of the brewery, but it's a very nicely presented bottle. I'm sure you'd agree with that. It looks pretty cool. And this, I understand in Estonian, when you have this little sort of squiggle above the O, it means you say like U. So this beer is pronounced Mõdu, and it's almost like the Estonian word for beer, ulu. So it's quite it's almost quite similar actually to some of the Scandinavian words. In Swedish you say ul, and I believe in Denmark it's ul. So I think it's kind of similar. So it's the same idea. And as I've said to you in other videos, the Estonian language actually is quite similar to Finnish as well. So, but as I say, they will only understand about 30% of each other's language. But let's get this open and get on with the tasting here. As I mentioned to you, it's a 5% mead beer, so it should be a really interesting one to try. As you can see, a nice smoky opening there. So let's get this guy out and get on with the tasting. My first taste of Estonian mead. And I think Einar actually sent me this bottle around Christmas or just before that. So this is why I'm able to get the sort of holiday beers. I'm not sure if this is a kind of all year round beer, if you like, but it should be interesting to try nonetheless. So as you can see, a nice sort of a rich amberish colour on the beer here. I forgot to show you the Saku bottle cap as well. So as you can see, it's the sort of standard Saku one there. All their beers have a similar bottle cap on their things too, but the Saku cooled ones, if I remember right, have a different bottle cap, as does the Rock beer. But as you can see, if I just bring up this beer to you, the head on this one's completely disappeared very, very quickly. My apologies there, I've got a bad throat these days, but as you can see, if I just bring up the light and let you see this a little bit more clearly, it's a very sort of rich, kind of deep amber golden colour there, very, very kind of attractive looking, although obviously it doesn't have the head on it here. I'm not sure if mead beer really should have a head on it actually, so please inform me in the comments section of that, but it does look like a really kind of interesting beer. There's a lot of carbonation kind of just popping up to the top here, so it should be really interesting for us to try. So let's just give it a smell before we get on with the tasting here. Pardon me. Very, very sweet sort of honey aromas, as you would expect. There's a little bit of kind of white bready aroma to it as well. So I'm sniffing it up actually. But yeah, there's a little bit of kind of white bready character to it as well, I would say. But there's definitely a little hint of cereal in there too, I would think, and also some kind of yeasty character. But definitely bready, yeasty character, a lot of honey notes, as you would expect obviously with it being a mead beer. I think it maybe has just a tiny, tiny little bit of roasted character to it, or toasted character, but we'll see. We'll give it a taste and see how we get on here. So this is the Mõdu from the Saku Õlletehas, which is an Estonian mead beer at 4%. Actually, on first taste, it reminds me actually a little bit of some of the malt drinks that you get in Germany, the non-alcoholic ones. But yeah, it's quite similar to the aroma, if you like. It's got strong caramel, and it's probably more of a honey flavour actually, if you like. The caramel flavour really is more of a honey rather than a caramel, if you like, if that makes sense. It's a lot darker and smoother really. But it does have a nice little bready and yeasty element to it there, and that comes out more on the aftertaste. There's definitely some sort of kind of apple-ish fruit in there as well. There's definitely a little bit of apple flavour to it as well. But it's a very interesting one. It's got nice, as I say, a nice kind of bready and yeasty flavour kind of coming out, sitting on the tongue in the aftertaste, right in the middle. And you've got some sort of apple-ish flavours to it as well, which is really interesting. But the kind of caramel and honey flavours are sitting around the edge of the tongue, I would say. So it's really quite interesting. I would have thought a mead is quite a bit sweeter than this, but it's just nicely done actually. It's kind of, it reminds me a little bit of these kind of malt drinks that you get in Germany, as I say, that are non-alcoholic. But yeah, it's actually quite a mild flavour. I would have thought that a kind of mead beer would be quite a little bit more, it would be quite a bit more full than this. It should actually, the body of this guy, to talk about the mouthfeel as well, it is actually very light bodied, but I thought it would have been a lot fuller and be pushing the sort of full bodied end of the scale, if you like. It's slightly over carbonated as well, which I would have thought it would have been a little bit more kind of smooth than it is, that nice oily mouthfeel coming in again. But that said, it's quite easy drinking, and it does remind me of these sort of German malts beers that you get that are non-alcoholic, and I do actually like the taste of these, but from a mead I would have expected something just a little bit more than that. But yeah, overall it's quite a nice beer, and I can see how this would be attractive on like Christmas Day. This would be a good beer to sort of sit and eat a kind of caramel shortcake or something like that with. Or it would be a good one to sit and sort of eat biscuits with, actually. This would go very, very well with biscuits. But yeah, it's an interesting beer. I wouldn't say it's the best one that you can get from the Saku Õlletehas, but I can see why it's attractive to drink this beer at Christmas. So, you know, if you are in Estonia around Christmas time, definitely give it a try and see what you think. It's an interesting thing to try. As I say, very reminiscent of some of these German malt beers that you can get. So give it a try and see what you think. Pardon me, sorry. So if you do get the chance, definitely give this guy a try. Let me know in the comment section if you do happen to have tried this beer yourself. I do think you will get better beers from the Saku Õlletehas. Some of their beers are very, very nice. Like I said, the Mõdu is a very, very good beer as well, and their bock beers and porters are supposed to be very good too. So give those a try if you get the chance, and I would say give this guy a try just so you can say you've tried some Estonian mead. But thanks again for watching my beer reviews. As always, let me know in the comment section your own thoughts on this beer if you do happen to have tried it. I do have a few more Estonian beer reviews beers to review for you over the next little while, so subscribe to the channel if you do want to see that. And thanks again for your support over my 235 or so videos that I've done for you now. Thanks again, and please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff, and I will catch you soon with more beer reviews. Cheers.